For 13 years, I honored my vows, but his truth was a lie maintained by monthly payments sent to a fictitious ailing sister. Good day, dear viewers. My name is Eleanor Vance, but everyone calls me Ellie, and I am 76 years old. Today, I am going to share the story of how my life, which seemed perfectly crafted and secure, shattered in an instant, only to be rebuilt into something far more valuable and authentic. It is a story of betrayal, but ultimately of powerful, unexpected redemption. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. It truly helps me keep sharing these deeply personal moments with you. Let's travel back to the summer of 1968. I was barely 20, fresh out of art school, though I hadn't yet found the courage to pursue my passion for sculpting. That was the year I married Graham Albright. Graham wasn't a trucker, but a handsome, ambitious young architect with a future as polished and promising as the sleek skyscrapers he dreamt of designing. He was sharp, driven, and adored me with a tenderness I found utterly irresistible. I, a simple girl from a close-knit, unpretentious family, saw in him the stability and sophistication I yearned for. Our wedding was grand, a contrast to the quick, modest ceremonies of my parents' generation. We were to be modern. We were to be forever. Our beginning was, on the surface, charmed. We lived in a stunning pre-war apartment in Manhattan. Graham's career quickly took off, requiring frequent travel, not across the country by road, but across state lines to manage high-end projects. Boston, Philadelphia, and most frequently, a large ongoing corporate park development in New Jersey. Sometimes he would be gone for 4 or 5 days, leaving me in our beautiful, quiet home with the promise of a life we were building together. Our first child, Evelyn Rose, was born a year later. 2 years after that, William Henry arrived. And 3 years later, little Henry James completed our trio. 3 children, a busy household, and me juggling playdates, private school applications, and maintaining a home that often felt too large when Graham was away. It was shortly after the birth of William that Graham first introduced the subject of his sister, Sylvie Moreau. He claimed she lived in a quiet suburb outside Philadelphia, suffering from a complex, debilitating autoimmune disorder that required constant care and expensive specialized treatment. He never specified the disease. He just said it was a private matter, painful to discuss. Every single month, like clockwork, Graham would write a check, a significant portion of his substantial salary, to send to Sylvie. "Ellie, she's all I have left. Our parents passed tragically. I cannot, in good conscience, let my own blood suffer alone," he would tell me, his professional facade cracking just enough to show what I mistook for profound familial devotion. And I, so naive in my love, found his commitment deeply moving. I admired his sacrifice. The years rolled on. We were comfortable, even wealthy by my family's standards. Yet, there were moments, often when I wanted to enroll Evelyn in that competitive ballet program, or when the children desperately needed new winter coats, that I would look at the thick, reserved envelope bearing Sylvie's name and feel a sharp, inexplicable pang. But I never spoke a word of complaint. I was raised to be a supportive wife. His family matters were his prerogative. I built my life around his demanding schedule, filling my days with the joys of motherhood and the quiet comfort of our privileged existence. What I found truly odd, but stubbornly ignored, was that in almost 13 years of marriage, we never once met Sylvie. Holidays, birthdays, no invitations, no calls, not even a simple letter thanking him for the life-saving support. When I suggested we drive to Philadelphia, even just for a dinner, Graham would become instantly irritable. He claimed her condition made visitors impossible, that her environment had to be sterile and controlled. "One day, Ellie, when her health is stable," he would always promise, deflecting the conversation with a strained kiss. And I, believing in his inherent goodness, accepted it all. The routine was a tightly woven fabric of our lives. Graham would fly out on Monday, call nightly with carefully curated updates about structural beams and client meetings, and return home late on Friday. The New Jersey projects always demanded the longest, most lucrative trips, he explained. Everything changed in the spring of 1981. Our eldest, Evelyn, was 12, William 10, and Henry 7. I had begun dabbling seriously in my artistic endeavors, setting up a small pottery wheel in the corner of our sunroom, a therapeutic escape from the gilded routine. That March, as I was packing Graham's bespoke Italian wool suit for his supposed week-long trip to the New Jersey site, I found it. It was tucked deep inside the internal chest pocket of his garment bag. It was not a check or a business receipt, but a simple, laminated photo booth strip. On the strip were 4 smiling, candid photos. Graham looking relaxed and younger than his years, embracing a woman with soft, kind eyes, and beside them, a girl, perhaps 12 years old with long, dark hair. Written faintly in the corner of the strip, in a feminine hand, were 3 devastating words: "Our New Jersey family." My heart did not just race, it stopped. A cold, crushing weight settling deep in my chest. I stared at the girl. Her nose, the arch of her brow, the way she smiled. It was a mirror image of my son, William. A wave of icy nausea washed over me. I slowly peeled the photograph from the garment bag and slipped it into the pocket of my housecoat. Graham, oblivious, kissed me on the cheek, hugged the children, and walked out the door toward his waiting car and his meticulously planned deception. I stood in the doorway, my world a silent, imploding star, knowing I held the key to a truth that would destroy everything I knew. But I didn't utter a word. I needed more than a photograph. I needed proof that would stand up against the world. The silence that followed Graham's departure was deafening. I felt like an actress trapped on a stage, forced to play the part of the contented wife while my entire set was crumbling around me. I continued my routine with mechanical precision, packing the children's lunches, monitoring their homework, and attending social functions. But every smile was a practice shield, every word I spoke a careful calculation. The photograph was tucked inside my jewelry box, a cold, hard piece of evidence I revisited every hour. Who was this woman? And who was this child, this miniature Graham, who shared my children's features? My first undeniable piece of evidence came 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon. The antique telephone in our study rang, its shrill noise tearing through the tense quiet of the afternoon. It was Graham's firm, Albright and Stevens. "May I speak to Mr. Albright?" The secretary, a pleasant woman named Denise, inquired. "He is on site in New Jersey this week, Denise." "Is there a message?" I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal tremors. There was a moment of awkward silence on the line. "Oh, that's quite confusing, Mrs. Albright. The partners were looking for him urgently regarding the Philadelphia design review. He was supposed to be in the office this week. The New Jersey site inspection isn't until next Tuesday." The air left my lungs. The ground didn't open up beneath my feet, as they say. Instead, the floor of my elegant Manhattan apartment seemed to become solid ice, freezing the panic and replacing it with a crystalline clarity. My husband was not just lying about a sick sister. He was lying about his entire professional schedule. "I see," I managed, the 2 words cutting through the confusion. "There must be some scheduling conflict. Please tell the partners he will call them this evening." I hung up the phone slowly, my hand trembling not with fear, but with a righteous fury I had never known. He hadn't been on a job site. He had simply been gone. I began to hunt. I knew Graham kept a separate ledger for the Sylvie payments, and I suspected he kept it separate from our joint accounts. I searched his private study, the sanctuary he always kept locked. I found the key hidden predictably inside a large brass bust of a Greek philosopher he adored. Inside his mahogany desk, under a stack of irrelevant blueprints, I found it. A small, dark red notebook. It was a precise financial record, detailing not just the monthly transfers, but also property tax payments, utility bills, and the final, gut-wrenching confirmation: tuition fees for Chloe Moreau's private school in a town called Summit. New Jersey tucked inside the ledger was a recent bank statement for an account at a local New Jersey credit union. On the back of the envelope, scrawled in Graham's hurried script, was an address, 48 Hawthorne Lane, Summit. NJI closed the ledger, returned the key to the philosopher, and walked calmly into the kitchen. I didn't cry. Tears felt utterly inadequate for the scale of this deception. I was dealing with a meticulously maintained alternative reality that had been funded by my husband for over a decade. The money he had always claimed was a burden to our families. Budget, the reason we couldn't take extravagant trips or move to a bigger home, was instead financing a secret kingdom just across the Hudson River. I wrote the address on a small slip of paper, using the precise, elegant handwriting I had been taught in finishing school. I tucked that slip into the back of our wedding photo, the very portrait where we had vowed eternal fidelity. The irony was a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. I was hiding the proof of his ultimate betrayal right next to the symbol of our sacred bond. The following week was the longest of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sculpted. I attacked the clay on my wheel with a desperate energy, turning my silent rage into furious, abstract forms. My children, my sweet Evelyn, William, and Henry, noticed my distant, haunted look. "Mom, are you okay? Are you mad at Dad?" Henry asked one evening, his eyes wide and concerned. I kissed his forehead, smoothing his hair that was exactly the color of Graham's. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. Very, very tired. But I knew I couldn't live with this knowledge. I couldn't be ruled by fear. How could I rebuild my life? I was 43, with 3 children and a newborn on the way, a fact I had only confirmed a few weeks ago and had been waiting for the perfect moment to share with Graham. A lawyer's brief flashed in my mind. Grounds for divorce, child support, alimony. The thought was terrifying. But the thought of remaining married to a sophisticated ghost was far worse, I decided. I would go to Summit, New Jersey, the moment Graham left for his next scheduled business trip, which he conveniently claimed would be a full week in Boston. On the Friday before his supposed departure, I called my dear, trusted friend Clara and asked her to watch the children. "I have a difficult personal matter to attend to, Clara. In New Jersey. I'll be back Saturday night." Clara, who knew my silent nature, only hugged me tight and promised the children would be safe. I gathered the few $100s I had secreted away from my small pottery sales, packed my most dignified suit, a sharp navy wool that gave me an artificial sense of professional armor, and put the photo booth strip into my purse. It was time to go hunting for the truth, even if it meant stepping into the abyss. The bus ride from the Port Authority to Summit, New Jersey, felt like a journey to a parallel dimension. My mind raced, reviewing the possibilities. A reasonable explanation, a cousin using the name Sylvie, a financial disaster, Graham lending money to a client's wife, or the inevitable, crushing truth. I rehearsed my lines, seeking a tone that was authoritative yet detached. I wouldn't descend into hysterics. I would simply seek clarity. Summit was, as the address implied, an affluent, tree-lined town. The houses were sprawling, set back from the street with immaculate landscaping. It was a world away from the busy, vertical glamour of our Manhattan co-op. This was a grounded, domestic luxury. I finally reached number 48 Hawthorne Lane. It was a beautiful, shingled colonial house, classic and welcoming, with a well-maintained garden and a discreet sign near the front walkway. The Kiln House, custom ceramics and art studio. A ceramics studio. Not a sterile sick room. My carefully constructed image of an infirm, suffering sister immediately disintegrated. Graham had not just been paying for a lie. He had been funding a thriving creative enterprise. I took a deep, steadying breath, pushed open the small iron gate, and walked up the stone path. The sound of my own footsteps echoed deafeningly in the suburban quiet. My heart felt like a drum against my ribs as I lifted the brass knocker. The door was answered almost immediately by the girl in the photo strip. Chloe. She was about 12 or 13, with a cascade of dark, curly hair and eyes that were undeniably Graham's, the same warm, intelligent brown I saw in my son. "William, every morning. Good morning, ma'am," Chloe said, polite and utterly composed. "Can I help you? My mother is in the studio and my father is out on a run." My father. The words hit me not as a shock, but as a confirmation, a cold, final validation of my deepest fear. I had been right all along. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but my face remained impassive. I am looking for Sylvie Moreau, I managed, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. Is she here? Mom's just finishing up a glazed batch. Please come in. Chloe held the door open, a radiant, innocent smile on her face. The foyer was bright, adorned with gorgeous, vibrant ceramic pieces, vases, bowls, and abstract sculptures. This was the work of an artist, not an invalid. I'm waiting for my husband, Chloe volunteered, leading me toward the back of the house where the sound of muffled music was coming from. He said he'd take me for a run before we head to the shore for the weekend. We do that a lot when he's not busy in Manhattan. My heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The shore for the weekend. While I was home, juggling 3 children and a pregnancy he didn't know about, he was playing the role of the devoted, active suburban father. We reached the entrance to the sun-drenched studio. A woman, slender and lovely, with a concentration streak of clay across her cheek, looked up from a spinning pottery wheel. It was Sylvie. Her eyes, kind and expressive, met mine. She was wearing comfortable linen clothes, her hands were strong and stained with earth pigments, and she looked vibrant and healthy. Oh, hello. Sorry about the mess, Sylvie said, wiping her hands on an apron. Chloe, darling, who is our visitor? Before Chloe could answer, the door leading from the yard burst open, and there he was. Graham Albright, my husband of 13 years, stood framed in the doorway, wearing running gear, sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked younger, happier, utterly relaxed. He was not on a job site in Boston. He was home, our eyes locked. The easy smile vanished from his face, replaced by a ghastly, utter horror. The blood drained from his features, leaving him pale as the white porcelain on Sylvie's workbench. Eleanor, he whispered, the name catching in his throat like broken glass. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality imploding. Chloe looked from her father to me, confusion clouding her beautiful, Graham-like eyes. Dad, who is this? Before Graham could invent a desperate lie, Sylvie stepped forward, wiping her hands clean. Graham, you know this woman? Chloe, go wait for me in the kitchen, sweetie. No, I interrupted, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the pure, cold steel of my resolve. Don't send her away. She has the right to understand why her life is a lie. I slowly opened my purse, pulled out the laminated photo booth strip, and laid it flat on Sylvie's clay-dusted workbench. I found this in my husband's coat, the one he wears when he tells me he is flying to Boston to work on a high-stakes project. The one he wears when he tells me he is sending money to his ailing, reclusive sister in Philadelphia. I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle on all 3 of them. My name is Eleanor Vance. I have been married to this man for 13 years, and we have 3 beautiful children. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes fixed on the photo and then on Graham. Sylvie stared at me, then at the man she called her partner. The shock gave way to a dawning, terrible realization, the same horror I had seen on Graham's face. He told me he was a widower, Sylvie breathed, her strong hands suddenly trembling. He told me his first wife died tragically and that he was supporting his sister's family. And he told me you were his sick sister. Sylvie, the one who needed constant financial aid, I countered. The years of silent sacrifice suddenly turning into rage. The money he claimed we couldn't spare for my children's ballet lessons or new winter coats was funding this studio, this house, and this beautiful girl's private school tuition. The room spun. I felt the familiar wave of nausea, sharper this time. The pregnancy, the 4th child I was carrying, the child Graham didn't know about. I looked at him, his face now a mask of pure terror, cornered, exposed, and utterly ruined. You have children? Sylvie asked, her voice cracking, her gaze locked on my stomach. How many? 3 already, I replied, placing a hand protectively over my still flat abdomen. And as of last week, I confirmed I am expecting our 4th. Another child you will have to abandon half the time to continue this performance. The sound of my own confession echoed the final, catastrophic blow. Graham sunk into a nearby chair, his face buried in his hands. 2 families, 2 lives, all destroyed in one brutal, unexpected Saturday afternoon. The confrontation in the Kiln house was a scene of unadulterated devastation. It wasn't a shouting match. It was a quiet, suffocating implosion. Graham, the polished architect, the man who commanded boardrooms, was reduced to a whimpering child, incapable of forming a coherent defense. "I love you both," he muttered into his hands, the pathetic phrase hanging in the ceramic-scented air. "I love both families. It just became too complicated. I never meant to hurt anyone." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. "You never meant to hurt anyone, Graham? What do you call 13 years of systematic, calculated deception? Every time you said you were reviewing plans, you were here, playing house. Every check you wrote to your ailing sister stole dignity and opportunity from your Manhattan children. Look at this house. Look at this life. You built one family on the ruins of another." Sylvie was now standing, her hands clenched, tears streaming down her clay-streaked face. She turned her anger on Graham, a fury just as intense as mine, but laced with the deep pain of being lied to not just financially, but emotionally. "The pension story. You told me Eleanor had died, and because of your contract, you couldn't officially marry me or risk losing the payout that supported your children, the children of your deceased wife. You fabricated a tragedy to justify your cowardice." Chloe, their daughter, stood frozen by the doorway, her beautiful bright eyes welling with silent, horrified tears. She was witnessing the utter annihilation of her world, the man she adored being revealed as a hollow, self-serving illusion. "I have siblings?" Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. "I have brothers and a sister, and I never knew?" That was the moment the steel in my heart softened. I looked at Chloe, this innocent victim of Graham's architectural lies, and I saw my own children's pain reflected in her eyes. I walked slowly toward her, ignoring Graham's desperate attempt to intercept me. "Yes, Chloe," I said gently, crouching down to meet her gaze. "You have 3 siblings, Evelyn, William, and Henry, and you look just like William. They are good children. They don't know about you and you didn't know about them. But we are all here, in this moment, because of the same man." Sylvie, watching the interaction, finally understood the full scope of Graham's performance. She realized that the stable, loving life she thought she had was built on a foundation of stolen money and emotional theft from a woman he claimed was dead. "Get out." "Graham," Sylvie commanded, her voice trembling but firm. "I can't look at you. Get out of my studio and out of my life." Graham, seeing both his carefully constructed worlds collapsing simultaneously, panicked. He scrambled for his jacket, throwing on his pristine running shoes, and fled the house. He didn't look back. I turned to Sylvie. We were 2 strangers, 2 victims, staring at each other across the wreckage. "I am leaving," I said, picking up my purse. "I am going back to New York. When he returns to our home, I want him gone. He has betrayed us both in the most profound way. What will you do?" Sylvie asked, her eyes searching mine for any sign of a shared path. "I will survive," I replied, the words a promise to myself. "And I will raise my 4 children with dignity. He will not steal our future." I caught the last bus back to Manhattan, the evening twilight casting long, dramatic shadows across the New Jersey skyline. The pain was immense, but it was overshadowed by an intense, invigorating feeling of liberation. The truth, however brutal, had set me free. I arrived home late, collecting my children from Clara's apartment. Clara, seeing the raw emotion in my eyes, only held me and said, "We'll talk tomorrow, Ellie. Go be with your babies." The following days were agonizing. I told Clara the sanitized version, that Graham had confessed to an affair and that I had thrown him out. I couldn't bear to admit the 13-year double life. I waited, rehearsing the conversation, preparing for the inevitable confrontation when Graham returned from his Boston trip on Friday. But Graham never came home. On Thursday morning, I received a call from his firm. "Mrs. Albright, we received a curt fax from Graham. He resigned, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. He emptied his office and instructed us to mail his final paycheck to a P.O. box in Delaware." The line went dead. I felt no surprise, only a cold, sickening confirmation of his utter cowardice. He hadn't chosen Sylvie. He hadn't chosen me. He had chosen flight. He had abandoned both his carefully built kingdoms and all 4 of his children. The successful, respected architect had become a ghost, leaving me with a mortgage, 3 children, a looming pregnancy, and a shattered name. My savings were minimal, and my only professional skill was a half-finished attempt at artistic creation. The immense, terrifying reality of being a single mother of 4 in Manhattan in the 1980s suddenly crashed down on me. I was alone, but my resolve was absolute. Graham Albright would not define the legacy of the Vance family. The year 1981 became the crucible that forged my new life. Graham's abrupt disappearance meant I had to file for divorce based on abandonment, a protracted and humiliating process that forced me to lay bare the architecture of his lies to my lawyer. It was painful to see my betrayal codified in cold, legal language, but I needed that paper, that Declaration of Independence, to breathe again. The neighborhood, of course, devoured the scandal. In the Manhattan social circles of the 1980s, a deserted wife, especially one visibly pregnant, was a subject of immense gossip. The pitying stares, the thinly veiled questions, the friends who suddenly became distant. They were almost as painful as the betrayal itself. But the judgment only fueled my ambition. I refused to become the object of tragedy. I would be the architect of my own resilience. My meager savings were depleted within 2 months. I had to let go of our housekeeper and sell some of the more elaborate pieces of furniture Graham had selected. My pottery, which had been a mere hobby, quickly became my lifeline. I had only my small borrowed kiln, a sunroom full of clay, and my own 2 hands. I poured all my grief, all my white-hot rage into the work. I sculpted abstract pieces, jagged edges, fractured surfaces, shapes that looked like they were screaming. And then, through the careful process of glazing and firing, I transformed the chaos into unexpected beauty. In August, my youngest child, my sweet little Clara Joy, was born. The labor was fraught with the stress of the preceding months, but the moment I held her small, perfect body, a new, invincible layer of determination settled over me. I would raise all 4 children, Evelyn, now 13, William, 11, Henry, 8, and the baby Clara, with fierce dignity, ensuring they would never want for the essentials. Even if luxury was gone, I began selling my work. I started with a small table at local street fairs, offering hand-thrown mugs and simple, elegant bowls. The pieces were distinctive. They carried an emotional weight that drew people in. I focused on quality and precision, the same qualities Graham had once valued in architecture, but applied them to art. I discovered that I was not merely throwing clay. I was throwing off the weight of my old life. One of my first and most loyal customers was a revered patron of the arts, Ms. Eleanor Dubois. A retired gallery owner, Ms. Dubois was a formidable woman with an eye for raw talent and a deep understanding of female fortitude. She began buying my more abstract, deeply personal sculptures. One damp November afternoon, Ms. Dubois appeared at my apartment. She didn't critique my technique or question my prices. Instead, she looked around the cramped, pottery dust-laden sunroom where I worked between changing Clara's diapers and helping Henry with schoolwork. "Ellie," she said, her voice sharp and direct, "your work is transcendent because it is honest. You are wasting it here selling mugs. I own a small, upscale gallery space in Greenwich Village that I use mostly for storage now. I want you to use it." Her proposal was staggering. She offered me the back third of her gallery space, a bright, beautiful studio with large windows and proper ventilation, in exchange for a small percentage of my sales. Crucially, she offered to introduce me to her network of high-end clients and help me set up a proper commercial kiln. "You are an artist, Eleanor, not a mere crafter. It is time you acted like one." I accepted instantly. Within weeks, I launched my small business, the Phoenix Kiln. The name was my defiant declaration to the world. I was rising from the ashes of betrayal, purified by fire. My older children stepped up immediately. Evelyn, sharp and mature for her age, managed the small inventory and finances after school. William, meticulous and practical, helped me with the heavy lifting and firing of the kiln. Henry, ever the extrovert, charmed the few clients who came to my makeshift studio. They were my team, my purpose, and my strength. The financial struggle was relentless, a constant, nagging fear. There were weeks when the choice between buying kiln fuel and buying new shoes for William was heartbreakingly real. But I was building something real, something rooted in my own talent, not in my husband's ill-gotten wealth. The contrast was everything. I felt more honest, more powerful, selling a $70 hand-thrown bowl than I ever had spending $7,000 of Graham's money. I maintained a cold, tense silence regarding Graham. I told the children their father had made a terrible mistake, moved away, and was no longer coming home. They grieved in their own ways, Evelyn with sharp, silent hostility, William with quiet, confused sadness, Henry with outbursts of anger. I knew they needed closure, but I couldn't give them the full, ugly truth. Not yet. The truth was still hiding in New Jersey, a shadow I had tried to outrun but knew I would eventually have to face. My heart ached for Sylvie and Chloe, the two other victims of Graham's grand design. I wondered daily what had become of the kiln house and the vibrant woman I had met there. I wondered if their destruction was as complete as mine. It was almost 2 years after the confrontation, 2 long years of building. The Phoenix Kiln piece by painstaking piece, when the shadow from New Jersey finally called. I was in my Greenwich Village studio, glazing a complex new sculpture, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was hesitant, low, and unmistakable. "Ellie? It's Sylvie. Sylvie Moreau." I set down my brush. The sound of her name sent a jolt of both fear and immediate, curious empathy through me. "Sylvie," I replied, my voice calm. "I often wondered about you. How are you and Chloe?" A choked sound came over the line. "Not well, Ellie, not well at all. I don't know how you are managing, but the kiln house, it's gone. I lost the house 6 months ago. Graham left the mortgage in default, and the local bank refused to work with me. He stopped all communication, all financial support. I'm renting a tiny apartment now, and the studio is just a corner in my landlord's damp basement. I am buried in debt. I don't know what to do." Her desperation was raw, palpable. I listened in stunned silence. The successful, vibrant artisan I had met was now, like me, facing financial ruin. Graham had not just abandoned my family. He had truly abandoned all his families. He was consistent only in his betrayal. "Have you heard from him? Any sign at all?" I asked. "Nothing." "A ghost," she whispered. "He left a short, cowardly note saying he didn't deserve either of us, and that he was leaving the region. I think he's vanished entirely." I sat with the silence, letting the magnitude of the shared injury sink in. My children's father had been a serial liar, a professional ghost. But as I heard Sylvie's broken voice, I realized something profound. My rage was not directed at her. My rage was solely directed at Graham, the architect of our joint catastrophe. Sylvie and Chloe were just as much my victims as Evelyn and William. "Sylvie," I said slowly, the idea forming with a sudden, startling clarity. "I have built a small ceramics business here in the village. It's growing, but I am overworked. I need help with production, with glazing, and with the business side. I remember the quality of your work, and I remember your fierce determination." "Ellie, I don't understand," she stammered. "Move to New York," I stated, my tone firm, already planning the logistics. "Bring Chloe. I know a woman with a small, spare apartment downtown who is looking for a short-term tenant. I will introduce you to my patron, Ms. Dubois. You are an artist, Sylvie. We are both artists. We will pool our strength and our talent. We will not let Graham Albright's cowardice define our children's future." There was a long, shuddering silence. "You would do that? After everything?" "It wasn't you who betrayed me, Sylvie. It was him who betrayed us both." 2 weeks later, Sylvie and Chloe arrived in New York City with 2 beat-up suitcases and a collection of beautiful but slightly chipped ceramic pieces. I helped them settle into a small, affordable apartment near the village. It was strange, surreal, this merging of 2 broken lives. The integration of the children was immediately tense. My eldest, Evelyn, at almost 15, was immediately hostile. She knew that Chloe, only a few years younger, was the daughter of the woman her father had chosen over us. "Why are you helping them, Mom?" "They're the reason Dad left," Evelyn accused, her voice sharp with adolescent pain. I sat Evelyn down, holding her hands tightly. "No, my darling. Your father left because he is a profoundly weak, dishonest man. Sylvie and Chloe are victims, just like us. Look at Chloe. She is suffering the same abandonment you are. We are women, Evelyn. We must stand together and protect each other, not tear each other down." Slowly, hesitantly, the ice began to thaw. Sylvie, deeply grateful, threw herself into helping me. Her expertise in glazes and firing techniques was immediately invaluable. She also possessed a keen administrative mind, quickly organizing my scattered inventory and handling supplier negotiations. The Phoenix Kiln stabilized instantly. The most shocking connection formed between my son, William, and Chloe. They shared more than just their father's striking brown eyes and aristocratic nose. They shared a quiet, meticulous love for complex detail. William, with his love for logistics, and Chloe, with her inherent organizational talent, began working side by side, sorting clay, weighing chemicals, and tracking sales. It was a painful, beautiful discovery of late-found siblinghood, united by a shared sense of loss and a shared genetic bond. Sylvie and I, united by a common ghost and a shared desire for dignity, began to feel less like rivals and more like sisters. We had a common language of pain and a common purpose: to build an empire of honesty from the ashes of a spectacular lie. The Phoenix Kiln was no longer just my business. It was ours. The alliance between two abandoned women rapidly transformed the Phoenix Kiln from a struggling artisan shop into a burgeoning commercial enterprise. Sylvie brought a discipline to the business that my artist's mind often lacked. She managed accounts, secured better pricing on raw materials, and streamlined our production schedule. I, freed from the administrative burden, could focus entirely on the creative direction, pushing the boundaries of my sculpting and design. In 1983, Ms. Dubois, our generous patron, decided to retire fully and offered to sell us the Greenwich Village space outright. The asking price was immense, easily exceeding the combined value of everything Sylvie and I possessed. We stood in the empty gallery after hours, staring at the floor plans, our shared dream hanging precariously on a financial cliff. "We can't afford it, Ellie," Sylvie sighed, running a tired hand through her dark hair. "We're doing well, but this is millions of dollars." "We will do it, Sylvie," I insisted, a fierce light in my eyes. "We deserve this space. Graham Albright spent 13 years financing a lie. We will spend the next 13 years financing a truth. We will get a bank loan. And we will be partners, 50-50. Full equity, full risk, full reward." Sylvie stared at me, astonishment giving way to profound emotion. "You truly trust me that much? After everything he did?" "We are sisters by choice, Sylvie. The trust we share is stronger than any bloodline Graham could have given us." We both learned the hard way that promises mean nothing. Only action matters. We marched into the bank. Dealing with the patriarchal financial institutions of the 1980s was another battle entirely. The young male loan officer treated us with condescending pity. He repeatedly asked if our husbands or a male relative would be signing as guarantors. I felt the familiar burn of injustice. "Sir," I stated, my voice clear and authoritative, "the only collateral you need is the business plan we have presented and the sheer will of two women who have nothing left to lose. Our hands built this, and our hands will sign for it." After weeks of negotiation, the loan was begrudgingly approved, but only after my eldest son, William Henry, then 16 and a certified genius in mathematics, was required to sign the complex paperwork as a legal witness. A symbolic nod to male authorization. It was a humiliating reminder of the world we lived in, but we accepted the injustice for the sake of the victory. We were now the owners of our own space. We officially renamed the combined business the Phoenix Kiln, Studio and Gallery. The children continued to flourish in this environment of honesty and hard work. Evelyn, now 17, discovered a passion for the aesthetic arrangement of our ceramic pieces, becoming our in-house visual designer. William, quiet and analytical, took over all logistics and inventory management. Henry, the extrovert, inherited his father's charisma but applied it ethically, becoming our primary sales liaison with high-end interior designers. And Chloe, Sylvie's daughter, was our secret weapon. She excelled in high school and, upon entering college to study business administration, began integrating modern financial controls into our ancient ledger system. She organized the data, projected future growth, and gave us the clarity we needed to expand. The half-siblings, once estranged, became an inseparable business unit. William and Chloe shared a pragmatic, structural approach, a surprising inheritance from their absent architect father, applied now to the art world. Evelyn and Chloe bonded over fashion and design, often collaborating on the presentation of the gallery space. In 1986, we secured our first major corporate contract, designing and producing custom ceramic tiles for a new high-rise office building in downtown Manhattan. The irony was not lost on us. The man who had been the architect of our ruin had been replaced by the creations of his abandoned families. I never heard from Graham Albright again. He became a cautionary tale whispered between Sylvie and me, a lesson on the illusion of stability. But the constant fear of financial ruin was gone. We had replaced it with the solid, comforting knowledge that our success was earned, molded by our own hands, and fired in the heat of our shared ordeal. We had not just survived. We were thriving, building a creative empire that honored the talent and resilience of women. The Phoenix Kiln was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a new kind of family, and a defiant monument to the power of truth. The late 1980s brought the sweet, gratifying taste of stability. The Phoenix Kiln became a respected name, known not just for the quality of the work, but for the ethical backbone of its two female founders. We paid our bills on time, treated our small staff like family, and never once compromised on the integrity of our art. Our combined annual revenue crossed the seven-figure mark, a testament to the fact that passion, paired with strategic planning, thanks to Chloe, could indeed conquer betrayal. In 1989, my eldest, Evelyn, graduated from university with a degree in visual arts and immediately stepped in as the gallery's creative director, bringing a fresh, modern edge to our exhibitions. William, methodical and driven, graduated in industrial management and formalized our supply chain, ensuring we could handle large-scale contracts without compromising the artisan process. Life was full, honest, and good. The memory of Graham Albright had receded, becoming a faint, almost mythical shadow in the background of our vibrant, unconventional family. He was the cautionary tale we never spoke of directly, the ghost whose absence allowed us all to grow. Then the shadow returned, not as a threat, but as a final, pathetic echo. It was a cold morning in February 1990 when I received a letter from a law firm in Arizona. It was brief, impersonal, and devastating in its finality. The firm was handling the estate of a Mr. Graham Albright, who had died 2 weeks prior in a solo traffic accident on a remote stretch of highway in the desert. He had been working as a contract architectural consultant, moving from town to town, living out of cheap motels. There was no estate of value, only a handful of personal effects, which the firm offered to send to me as his last documented spouse. I sat in my studio, the letter trembling in my hands, tears finally falling. They were not tears of love or heartbreak. They were tears of complex, agonizing grief. I was grieving the man I had married at 20, the father of my 4 beautiful children, and the wasted potential of a brilliant mind destroyed by its own cowardice. I was grieving the final, humiliating confirmation of his utter failure to reclaim his life. Graham, the architect of skyscrapers, had died alone, without a home, without a legacy, without a single soul to mourn him save for the 2 women he had deceived. Sylvie was the first person I told. She read the letter in silence, then sank onto a stool, covering her face. Her grief was as complicated as mine, sorrow for the father of her child, relief that the possibility of his return and further deception was finally gone, and the deep shared pain of what he had stolen from both our lives. We held a private, small memorial for our children. We spoke truthfully but gently. We told them their father was brilliant, flawed, and deeply troubled, and that he had died far away. The children processed the news with the maturity we had instilled in them. They understood that the man who had abandoned them was not the man they needed to mourn, but the potential of the father he never became. The closure brought an immediate, chilling peace. We were finally, unequivocally, free. But just as we buried the ghost of Graham, a new, far more immediate shadow fell upon us. Sylvie, who had worked tirelessly and without complaint for years, began to show signs of profound exhaustion. She was a few years older than me, already in her early 50s, and the combined stress of the past decade, the betrayal, the financial collapse, the relocation, and the relentless pressure of running a booming business, had taken its toll. It started small, persistent, splitting headaches, a constant fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to cure, and a noticeable loss of appetite. She dismissed it as middle-aged burnout. I insisted she see a specialist. The diagnosis arrived in the spring of 1991 and struck us with the merciless force of a natural disaster, stage 3 ovarian cancer. The doctor explained that the insidious nature of the disease meant she had ignored the subtle symptoms for far too long, focusing instead on her daughter and the success of our business. The irony was savage. Graham had invented a sick sister to steal from us. Now, the woman who had become my true sister was genuinely, devastatingly ill. The following months were a blur of hospitals, chemotherapy, and radiation. Chloe, now 22 and working full-time at the Phoenix Kiln, was understandably devastated but found an incredible strength to manage the business operations while I, the woman who had once been her mother's rival, became Sylvie's constant companion. I sat beside her during the endless infusions, held her hand through the debilitating nausea, and read aloud to her when she was too weak to focus. Life had come full circle, transforming rivalry into the fierce, protective devotion of sisterhood. The years of Sylvie's illness, from 1991 to 1995, were the most brutally challenging, yet paradoxically, the most spiritually defining of my life. The Phoenix Kiln, now a successful entity, essentially ran itself under the capable hands of our children. Chloe and William handled the logistics and finance, while Evelyn and Henry managed the gallery and sales. This allowed me the profound privilege of dedicating myself entirely to Sylvie's care. I wasn't just a friend or a partner. I was a second daughter, a sister, a co-conspirator in a shared life forged by fire. I learned to administer medications, to navigate the cruel maze of insurance claims, and to simply be there, a calm, reliable presence in the face of medical chaos. I learned that true love wasn't the passionate, fleeting romance Graham had offered, but the quiet, tenacious devotion shown during times of utter weakness. In a quiet moment during one of her better days, sitting by the sun-drenched hospital window, Sylvie took my hand, her skin thin and fragile against mine, and said something that sealed our bond forever. "Ellie, when you stood in my studio that day in Summit, I thought you were the incarnation of everything I had done wrong. I saw you as the woman who had come to take away my life. But today I realize you were the woman who came to save it. You freed me from a lie and you gave me this—" She squeezed my hand weakly. "A true family and a true friend." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened with unshed tears. All I could do was squeeze back, allowing the sheer weight of our shared history to communicate the depth of my love and respect for her courage. Sylvie fought with a ferocious tenacity that belied her small frame. She had periods of remission, during which she would return to the studio, her head covered by a brightly colored silk scarf, her eyes burning with renewed creative energy. She would help Chloe review contracts or organize the production schedule, finding meaning and purpose in the routine of the business she had helped build. But the relapses were frequent and brutal. By 1995, her body was simply too weary to continue the fight. On a warm autumn day, Chloe's 26th birthday, Sylvie passed away peacefully in her bed, surrounded by the ceramic art she had loved. She held my hand on one side and Chloe's on the other. Her final breath was a quiet sigh, releasing her spirit from a body ravaged by years of hidden stress and a final, relentless disease. The grief that followed was immense. Sylvie was not merely Chloe's mother. She was the spiritual center of our reconstructed family. She was the diplomat, the quiet strength, the one who truly understood my pain. Her absence left a void that felt impossible to fill. It was during the deep quiet of our mourning that I made a decision that surprised everyone, including my children. Using our accumulated savings and a smart bridge loan secured by William, I purchased a beautiful, slightly older brownstone in a quiet, historically rich neighborhood, a home large enough for all of us. I immediately went to Chloe. Chloe was living alone in the small apartment, managing her grief and running the administrative side of the Phoenix Kiln with relentless focus. "Chloe," I said, meeting her eyes, "I know you need time to grieve, but you are not doing it alone. Your mother was my sister. You are my daughter. Come live with us. You belong with us. Our family has always been unconventional, but it has always been complete. Now, let's make it whole again." Chloe, exhausted and heartbroken, accepted the invitation. And so, we began a new chapter. Me, my 4 children, and Chloe, the daughter of the woman I had once feared most. The house was filled with the controlled chaos of 5 ambitious young adults and their aging, fiercely protective mother. The family continued to expand. William, my analytical son, married a brilliant civil engineer named Anna in 1996. The following year, I held my first grandchild, Gabriel, in my arms. Looking at that tiny, perfect face, I realized that every single moment of pain, the discovery of the photograph, the lonely bus ride, the betrayal, the fight for the loan, the beautiful friendship with Sylvie, had been worth it. This was my legacy. Not the money, not the art, but this growing, interconnected, and fiercely loyal family. As the new millennium approached, the Phoenix Kiln stood as a testament to our collective resilience. We were not just surviving, we were defining success on our own terms. My children and Chloe, now all in their late 20s and early 30s, had fully transitioned into leadership roles. Evelyn had elevated our ceramic art into high fashion, collaborating with Parisian designers and securing major gallery exhibitions. William managed the manufacturing and logistics with the precision of a military operation, ensuring profitability and efficiency. Henry had secured major corporate contracts, including installations in dozens of new hotels across the country. Clara, my youngest, having completed law school, opened her own family law practice but maintained a crucial role, overseeing all our legal compliance and contracts. Chloe, our administrative powerhouse, ran the day-to-day operations and financial strategy, ensuring the long-term solvency and growth of the business. By 2002, I had officially reduced my active participation in the business. I still went to the studio 3 days a week to create my personal sculptures and consult on design direction, but the reins were securely in the hands of the next generation. This newfound quiet time allowed me to reflect deeply on the unexpected trajectory of my life. I had been the betrayed wife, the abandoned mother, the struggling artisan. Now I was the revered matriarch, the founder of a highly respected enterprise, and the center of an unconventional, thriving family. The scars of the past were still present, but they had transformed into emblems of victory. It was in 2015, at the age of 69, that my life took an entirely new turn. Clara, my lawyer daughter, insisted I speak at an event for women entrepreneurs. "Mom," she argued, "your story isn't about business. It's about survival. It's about turning betrayal into capital. Other women need to hear this." I was terrified. I was an artist of the hands, not a speaker of words. I felt acutely the lack of the formal education I had sacrificed to raise my children. "I don't have a degree, Clara. What can I teach these accomplished women?" "You have lived experience, Mom," Clara replied. using the fierce determination she inherited from me. That is more valuable than any master's degree, I accepted. I stood on that stage and spoke not about P&L statements or supply chains, but about the terrifying isolation of being a single mother in the 1980s, about the weight of debt, and about the liberating fury that drove me to the pottery wheel. I spoke about the unlikely sisterhood forged in the fire of shared betrayal. The response was overwhelming. Women, young and old, lined up to share their own stories of professional abandonment, financial crisis, and unexpected rebirth. They didn't see a grandmother. They saw a warrior. This unexpected public engagement led to a new project. I began writing, documenting the lessons I had learned, the Matriarch's Memoir. I realized that my voice, refined by decades of quiet observation and fierce resilience, was a powerful tool. The greatest lesson, I shared, was this: our story is not defined by the blows we receive, but by how we respond to them. In 2018, at 72, the Phoenix Kiln secured a partnership with a major national lifestyle brand. It was a merger that allowed us to maintain our creative integrity and ethical sourcing policies while expanding our reach nationwide. The contract was signed in our original Greenwich Village studio with all 5 children, Evelyn, William, Henry, Clara, and Chloe, standing beside me. It marked the final, triumphant closing of the cycle, moving from a sunroom hobby funded by desperation to a multi-million-dollar national presence. The journey had been long, agonizing, and extraordinary. I transformed the greatest betrayal into the greatest opportunity, and the woman I once hated into the sister who helped me build everything. As the new decade unfolded, my focus shifted entirely from building a business to stewarding a legacy. My grandchildren, there were now 9 of them, running through the halls of the brownstone, blissfully unaware of the dramatic origins of their lineage, were the living proof that a broken foundation could support a beautiful, sprawling edifice. It was fascinating to watch how the children internalized the story of abandonment and turned it into purpose. William Henry, my practical, engineering-minded son, channeled his father's architectural talent, but grounded it in integrity and community. He founded a nonprofit initiative that designed and built affordable, sustainable housing for low-income families in the city. He ensured every structure was beautiful, dignified, and honest, the exact opposite of the hollow life his father had constructed. When asked about his motivation, William often said, "I learned from my mother that the greatest structures aren't those that touch the sky, but those that provide a safe, honest foundation for the people you love." Evelyn Rose, the creative director, used her position to establish the Sylvie Artisan Fund, which provided grants and mentorship to single mothers seeking careers in the visual arts. She often told the recipients, "My mother and her sister-in-arms, Sylvie, taught me that a piece of art made with heart can feed a family, clothe a child, and save a soul." Henry James, the charismatic salesman, ensured that integrity was the cornerstone of every deal. He became known in the industry for never compromising the Phoenix Kiln's ethical sourcing policy, even when it cost us lucrative contracts. He believed that the value of our word was far greater than the value of the dollar. Clara Joy, my youngest, turned her legal practice into a sanctuary for women battling complex, painful divorces, women who were navigating emotional and financial landscapes similar to the one I faced decades earlier. She dedicated her life to ensuring that women left their failed marriages with their dignity and financial stability intact. "I grew up watching a legal system built for men," Clara explained in an interview. "I want to ensure that my clients have the legal leverage my mother didn't have when she faced her own Goliath." And Chloe, Sylvie's daughter, was perhaps the most emotionally mature of all. As the CEO, she drove the company's financial success, but her passion lay in the Graham Albright Scholarship for Second Chances. The irony was deliberate and poignant. The scholarship, funded by the profits of the business Graham abandoned, was given to young students who had been marginalized or abandoned by their own families. "My father left us money and a lie," Chloe would say at the ceremonies. "My mother and Ellie taught me to use the money to fund a truth, and the lie to fund a second chance. Watching them, my heart swelled with a pride that transcended business success. We hadn't just healed. We had created a collective purpose. My children and Chloe, united by a half-shared genetic code and a fully shared trauma, demonstrated the true power of chosen family. They called me for advice, not just on glazes and business strategy, but on life, love, and legacy. Graham Albright, the man who had brought me so much devastation, had inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the opportunity to become a matriarch defined not by wealth or marriage, but by fierce, undeniable resilience. My life was no longer about reacting to his betrayal. It was about honoring the legacy of my own strength and the memory of my beloved sister-in-arms, Sylvie. The Phoenix Kiln was the structure, but the family was the art. I am 76 now, sitting on the sun-drenched porch of the brownstone, the scent of lavender mixing with the faint, comforting smell of damp clay carried over from my small backyard studio. My hands, slightly arthritic but still strong, occasionally reach out to touch the ceramic sculptures that line the shelves, pieces I molded during those terrifying early years. Now silent, beautiful witnesses to my journey. Graham Albright is long gone, a faint, distant memory. When my great-grandchildren ask about the great-grandfather they never knew, we tell them the simple truth. He was a talented man who made a catastrophic mistake, and his absence was the catalyst for the amazing family they see today. We speak of him not to perpetuate bitterness, but to contextualize our triumph. The greatest paradox of my life remains this. I owe my greatest joy, my career, my partnership with Sylvie, the unbreakable bond with my children, and this extraordinary legacy, to the man who shattered my heart. Without that betrayal, I might have lived out my days in the gilded cage of Manhattan, a woman of leisure, respected but unfulfilled, never discovering the fierce, capable artist within. The discovery of the photo booth strip was the most agonizing moment of my life, yet it was also the first step toward my true destiny. The scars of that initial pain are still with me, but they have faded into lines of wisdom. They are proof that I fell, but more importantly, that I got up. I transformed the architect's lie into an artisan's truth. I transformed the rival into a sister, and I transformed the ruins of a marriage into a robust, beautiful, and unconventional family empire. The most profound lesson I have learned, the one I hope to pass on to every person watching this, is this. Betrayal is an event. Resilience is a choice. You cannot control the hands that strike the blow, but you hold absolute power over the hands that rebuild your life. My dear viewers, if you are watching this, and if you are sitting with a broken heart, navigating a betrayal, or simply feeling overwhelmed by life's unexpected turns, remember my story. Remember Ellie Vance, the woman who was reduced to selling hand-thrown mugs just to feed her children, and who later built a multi-million-dollar empire of art and integrity. The secret is not avoiding the fall. It is finding the courage to take that very first step toward rebuilding, even when your legs are trembling and your hands are stained with the earth of your former life. That one single moment of courage is all it takes for the path forward to reveal itself. Thank you for walking this incredible journey with me. This life of mine, it is proof that a tragedy can be the beginning of your greatest triumph. If this story resonated with the strength you possess, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Matriarch's Memoir and join our growing family of survivors. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they are stronger than their pain. Your courage is your capital. Go build your empire. The growth of the Phoenix Kiln required more than just creative passion. It demanded the rigor and strategy that Chloe, with her degree in business administration, provided. By 1998, the business had expanded beyond the Greenwich Village location. Chloe spearheaded the opening of 2 small satellite galleries in Boston and Philadelphia, the very cities Graham had once used as the locations for his deceptive trips. The symbolism was a quiet, powerful victory we savored. We were conquering the geography of his lies. Chloe's influence was profound. She understood that while I was the artistic heart and Evelyn was the visual soul, the business required a modern, scalable structure. She introduced technology, a complex computer-based inventory system that William seamlessly integrated into his manufacturing logistics. This allowed us to manage the production of thousands of tiles for corporate contracts while maintaining the personalized, artisanal quality of our gallery pieces. Our success, however, did not come without the internal friction common to any family business. My son, Henry, the gifted salesperson, often clashed with Chloe, the analytical CEO. Henry thrived on intuition, closing deals based on charisma and emotional connection. Chloe demanded data, metrics, and risk assessment for every contract. Their arguments, often heated, were the sound of two different schools of thought fighting for the company's soul. "We need the numbers, Henry. You can't just rely on a handshake." Chloe would insist, tapping sharply on a quarterly report. "And you can't build an empire on spreadsheets, Chloe. You need human connection. You need the belief in the art." Henry would counter, throwing his hands up in frustration. I, the matriarch, learned to mediate, not by taking sides, but by ensuring they listened to each other. I realized that both approaches were necessary. Henry was the fire that drove the sales. Chloe was the water that prevented the company from burning itself out. Their combined force, though volatile, was unstoppable. My children's personal lives were flourishing alongside the business. Evelyn married a wonderful landscape designer named Mark in 2001. They shared a passion for organic forms and symmetry. William and Anna, the engineers, were raising their son, Gabriel, with a balanced blend of rigor and love, often bringing him to the studio where he would play quietly in the corner, surrounded by works of art. The brownstone I had bought, the phoenix nest, was constantly alive with noise, laughter, and the scent of clay and baking. Family dinners became a chaotic, beautiful symphony of 5 children, their spouses, and eventually, a growing flock of grandchildren. We were a tapestry woven from diverse threads, Vance, Moreau, Albright, all bound by the shared strength of our matriarchal core. I often watched Chloe interact with the others, especially William. There was a quiet understanding between the half-siblings, a shared glance that acknowledged the surreal, painful story that had brought them together. Their bond was one of the most unexpected gifts of the entire ordeal. They had found each other not through a joyous family reunion, but through the mutual devastation caused by their father's absence. My work, meanwhile, transitioned. I stopped selling to the public and focused entirely on large-scale sculptural commissions. My pieces became grand, intricate reflections of my life's philosophy, fractured forms held together by powerful, invisible bonds, often incorporating materials that had survived intense heat, metal, glass, and clay. My art was no longer about processing the trauma. It was about celebrating the triumph. I felt a profound, satisfying symmetry in my life. The architect had built a life on a flimsy, fictional design. I, the artisan, had built a lasting, unbreakable structure on the honest foundation of dirt and fire. The 1990s was a decade of outward expansion and inward consolidation for our family. As the business grew, so did our commitment to ethical labor practices, a silent, direct response to the easy dishonesty that had defined Graham's life. We instituted generous employee profit-sharing plans and focused on hiring and training women who were also seeking a second chance, often those recovering from difficult divorces or financial setbacks. It was Evelyn's idea to expand this commitment into a formal charity arm of the Phoenix Kiln. In 2006, inspired by her profound love for Sylvie, she established the Sylvie Moreau Foundation for Artisan Women. The foundation provided microloans, studio space, and mentorship to women in the arts who were struggling to balance creation with the responsibilities of single parenthood. I often spoke at the foundation's events, sharing my story, now refined and distilled into its most potent form. I no longer spoke of betrayal, but of transmutation, the process of turning the base metal of pain into the pure gold of purpose. My political awakening, sparked by the humiliating need for William's signature on the bank loan decades earlier, had a lasting effect on my youngest daughter, Clara. In 2008, Clara decided to run for a seat on the local city council. Her platform was clear: advocating for legislation that protected women's financial rights and promoted equitable access to business capital. It was a fiercely fought grassroots campaign powered by our entire family. Henry used his sales acumen to organize rallies. William applied his logistics skills to polling locations. Evelyn designed all the campaign materials, and Chloe managed the finances with impeccable precision. When Clara won her election, I wept with pride. Her victory wasn't just a political win. It was the ultimate dismantling of the old world structures that had tried to keep me silent and poor. My abandoned daughter had risen to change the very system that had abandoned me. The financial security and public success of the Phoenix Kiln eventually allowed me to face the one remaining fear. The memory of my first grandchild, Gabriel, being born into a family that had lost its patriarch to cowardice. I had to ensure the legacy of lies was replaced with the legacy of truth. When the grandchildren began asking questions about their grandfather, the ghost in the family photographs, I decided we would not lie. We told them a story appropriate for their age, framed around the central theme of choice. Your grandfather Graham, I would explain. Sitting them down in the studio amidst the warm glow of the kiln was a brilliant man. But he made a terrible choice. He chose lies over truth, and that choice cost him his family. Because of his mistake, he missed seeing you grow up. Why did he lie, Grandma? My grandson Gabriel once asked, his eyes wide. Because he was afraid, darling. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of the truth. But his mistake was the thing that finally freed me to find my true self, and to bring all of your aunts and uncles together. Without his mistake, this magnificent, chaotic, loving family would not exist. This was the final, profound act of transmuting the betrayal. I turned Graham Albright's destructive absence into a foundational myth of our family's unique creation. I taught the children to find gratitude not for the abandonment, but for the clarity that the abandonment provided. In 2011, I decided to sell the original brownstone. It was a painful decision, as the house held so many memories of struggle and triumph. But it was too small for our constantly expanding family. We bought a sprawling, beautiful property just outside the city, a place with enough acreage for a professional-grade studio, large gardens, and a massive kitchen capable of seating 20 for Sunday dinner. The move was the final physical severing of ties to my old life and a joyful acceptance of the new one. The Phoenix nest was relocated, bigger and bolder than ever, ready to shelter the next generation of Vances and Moreaus. The new compound quickly became the epicenter of our vast, unconventional family. Every significant milestone, births, graduations, anniversaries, and occasionally the quiet, somber passing of an old friend, was celebrated there. The house was not just a home. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of reconstruction. By 2020, the pandemic hit, challenging the business world in ways we had never anticipated. Storefronts closed, and large corporate contracts were paused indefinitely. The Phoenix Kiln faced a crisis that threatened to undo 30 years of relentless building. It was Henry, my charming salesman, who quickly pivoted. He had resisted online commerce for years, preferring the face-to-face charm of his transactions. But necessity forced evolution. Under the combined digital strategy of Henry and Chloe, the Phoenix Kiln launched a sophisticated e-commerce platform, selling curated artisan kits for at-home pottery and live-streamed online classes taught by Evelyn. The pandemic forced me, at 74, back to the wheel full-time. I began creating small, uplifting pieces, vases shaped like open hands, bowls glazed in soothing, peaceful blues. My work provided comfort and a sense of grounding to people isolated in their homes. My own small studio became a sanctuary once again, just as the sunroom in Manhattan had been decades ago. I found a surprising joy in this return to the basics, to the quiet, solitary work of my hands. The greatest triumph during this period was seeing my children and Chloe work as a seamless, resilient unit. There were no petty arguments, only unified resolve. They had learned the ultimate lesson from their childhood. When the storm hits, you hold on to each other. I never did remarry. There were men, kind, attentive gentlemen who appreciated my strength and my story. But I never felt the compelling need to anchor myself to a partner again. My heart was full, my life was rich, and my purpose was clear. The notion of a romantic attachment felt superfluous compared to the profound, unconditional love I shared with my children and grandchildren. I often reflect on the simple yet profound advice my own mother used to give me. God writes straight with crooked lines. What seemed to be the most crooked line in my life, Graham's betrayal, turned out to be the straightest path to freedom, self-discovery, and true prosperity. My life's purpose is no longer about art or business. It is about sharing the power of that transmutation. I continue to write and record my memoirs, reaching thousands of women who feel trapped, alone, and hopeless. I tell them that despair is a valid emotion, but it is not a destination. It is merely a starting point for an entirely new, more authentic journey. I am an advocate for the power of the hands that mold the clay, the hands that rock the cradle, the hands that sign the loan, and the hands that reach out to help another woman get back on her feet. My hands, now wrinkled and carrying the subtle tremors of age, are a living history of every piece I created, every tear I dried, every bill I paid, and every hand I held, especially Sylvie's. I wouldn't trade the struggle for the comfort of the life Graham had offered. That comfort was a beautiful lie. The struggle was the glorious truth. In 2024, at the age of 78, I finally gifted the Phoenix Kiln to the next generation. It was not a sale, but a formal transfer of ownership, with Evelyn, William, Henry, Clara, and Chloe becoming equal partners. I watched them sign the documents, 5 strong, diverse, and brilliant adults, united by a business and a bond stronger than any legal contract. It was the proudest moment of my professional life. My retirement is not an end, but a beautiful continuation. I spend my days doing what truly matters, sculpting for sheer joy, tending my massive rose garden, and, most importantly, teaching my great-grandchildren to mold their first pieces of clay. I show them how to transform a simple lump of earth into something lasting and beautiful, hoping they understand that the process is a metaphor for life itself. I am often asked what I would say to the frightened, naive 20-year-old Ellie Vance who married Graham Albright. I would simply tell her this. The path will be terrifying, and the pain will be profound, but embrace the shattering, because the woman you become will be infinitely more magnificent than the woman you were supposed to be. Don't waste your tears on the betrayal. Save them for the triumphs. And what would I say to the ghost of Graham Albright? I would say nothing. His judgment was self-inflicted. His legacy is his absence. My legacy is the enduring, beautiful presence of 5 successful children and a thriving business that continues to empower women. The only thing I owe him is a strange, paradoxical gratitude for providing the necessary destruction that allowed my true self to be born. The house is quiet now. I hear the distant laughter of my grandchildren playing in the garden. I look around at the photographs, Evelyn's wedding, William's graduation, Clara's first day on the city council, and especially the faded picture of Sylvie and Chloe standing proudly in front of the Kiln house. We did it. We took the tragedy of one man's lie and built a dynasty of truth. The final essential lesson I pass on is the most empowering. You are not a supporting character in someone else's drama. You are the architect of your own life. That photograph I found in Graham's coat pocket could have been the final, bitter end of my story. Instead, it was the first, terrifying chapter of a saga of resilience, reinvention, and fierce, unconditional love. Thank you for walking this incredible journey with me. This life of mine, it is proof that a tragedy can be the beginning of your greatest triumph. If this story resonated with the strength you possess, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Matriarch's Memoir and join our growing family of survivors. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they are stronger than their pain. Your courage is your capital. Go build your empire.